Heyo. So I've been recently, just out of pure nostalgia, just trying to revisit some old shows, some old stuff I used to watch, as a teenager and as a kid. And so obviously I need to revisit my favorite cartoon and probably your favorite cartoon also, since you clicked on this video, SpongeBob. So while rewatching the entire first season of SpongeBob, which is just like one of the best seasons of SpongeBob, might actually do like a ranking of all the episodes in a future video, so be on the lookout for that. But one episode in the first season did catch my eye. Before I can really discuss what really drew me into this episode of SpongeBob, we need to first talk about what actually happens in this episode. So the episode starts out with Squidward basically coming out, and he has his bubble gum and he throws his, wrapper at SpongeBob's house. First of all, why are you littering, man? Like, that's just not cool. And SpongeBob's house literally like just drags up to the paper, and SpongeBob's just like, hey, like, do you want this? Like, can I have it? And again, Squidward, just being weird and gross, just spits out the gum also onto the floor, which is again really weird. Like, man, you could just use that paper to like, kind of just wrap it up and throw it. But essentially, SpongeBob's really like, hyped about this paper. He's like, hey, why are you giving this away? Like, why are you throwing this away? This is like such a cool paper, and like you can do so much stuff with it. And are you sure you want to give this to me? Like, are you sure you want to throw this away? And Squidward keeps on saying that, yeah, like just keep it, just keep it, just keep it. As a 22-year-old guy, like, rewatching like SpongeBob at this age, this part gets a bit tedious and annoying. But finally, Squidward says, like in a very long statement, that
no matter how much I may beg and bleed and cry, don't give that paper back to me. Ever.
And once SpongeBob gets that, signal, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go have fun. And what happens next is really the interesting part of this episode, which is the fact that Squidward, like, starts doing these activities. He starts reading, he starts playing the clarinet and everything. But he keeps getting bothered by SpongeBob, like, laughing and having fun with the paper. He does a bunch of stuff with it, like, he rolls up like the paper into origami with his tongue. He uses it as like a helicopter. He uses it for impersonations and everything. And it gets to the point where Squidward starts spying on him, and he's like more and more curious about this paper and how SpongeBob is, having so much fun with it. Like, it's just a piece of paper. And as the episode proceeds, like, he tries to like distract himself and everything, but just nothing seems to work because SpongeBob is clearly having more fun than him. Even though like Squidward has like, these very designated like hobbies, like the clarinet and everything, SpongeBob just seems to have more fun outside with that paper. And it gets to the point where Squidward literally like, gives up everything for that paper. He's like, give it back to me. Like, take my house, take my shirt, take my TV, take my this, take my that. Just give me the paper. SpongeBob like initially is like, you made me promise not to give it back to you. But once he throws in his shirt into the picture, SpongeBob just like, what, just take the paper. And so Squidward takes that paper like completely with like no clothes on his body. He starts trying to have fun with the paper in an empty house with no anything. And he's trying to have fun with it, like he's doing the same things that SpongeBob is doing, but nothing seems to work, and he gets increasingly more and more frustrated because he's not having fun, he's not feeling happy. And the episode ends with like, Patrick sort of coming, taking the paper and wrapping his bubble gum in it and throwing it in the litter. Kind of interesting how like, Patrick actually had the right idea of like not littering, rolled up his gum, and like Squidward did not do that. Now let's actually get into the actual video and why I think this episode is so interesting. So far I've just told you like, what actually happens, and you might have a sense of what I'm going to talk about. You could actually even like, paint this whole episode as being like karma for like, Squidward littering and everything, because at the end Patrick kind of throws that, gum into a wrapper and actually throws it in the trash can. That could be one way you could actually look at this episode, just karma for Squidward just being a bad person and littering. But I think this episode is really interesting. Firstly, because when I started watching this episode, I saw the paper, like, the intro card and everything. And for some reason, I couldn't remember this episode, even though like I watched quite a lot of SpongeBob back in my day. I just couldn't remember the episode, and as it unfolded, I'm like, oh, okay, this is that episode and everything. But for some reason, as an adult, I'm seeing this in a very different light. As a kid, like, I'm just like looking at it as like a really funny, goofy episode where like he's just having fun with the paper. But as an adult, I'm like, wait, there's so much depth to this, because the entire idea that I got from this episode is that Squidward is someone who has like these hobbies, these passions, playing the clarinet and everything. And he's not happy with any of them. It's not bringing him any joy. I think one other aspect that makes this episode really interesting is that, as a kid at least, I was very overly fixated on SpongeBob and him having fun and just, it being a very normal episode of just SpongeBob having fun. I never really looked at Squidward in this episode before as much as I do now as an adult. Like, it's so clear that Squidward's like completely unhappy with like, the stuff that he does and the hobbies. Like, the episode literally starts with him just trying to like, go outside and just relax. And immediately SpongeBob kind of ruins that for him and he's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go inside now. So it's very clear that, all the stuff that he does and his hobbies like don't fulfill him. And he sees SpongeBob on the other hand, like, having so much fun. And it's very like crazy because he gave him that paper, right? So he effectively gave him that source of happiness, a source of happiness that he's been trying to find in all the stuff that he's been doing this entire time, but he just can't seem to find. And he just effectively gave that away to SpongeBob for free. Like, it was just given to him. And so I can see this episode as like, Squidward like effectively trying to find happiness in his life. And I think the final straw for him was when he actually brings out his clarinet and he starts playing it, and he's trying to show SpongeBob that, hey, like look, I can have fun, like I can make music. And the notes are all wrong, and SpongeBob actually tells him that you're playing all the wrong notes, this is how you play it. I think that was like the final straw for him, because like when you think of Squidward, you think of the clarinet, right? Like, it's so like synonymous with him. And once SpongeBob like actually like performs that thing for him on a piece of paper, like literal paper, Squidward I think just kind of loses it, and he effectively gives up everything because he's like, I need to have this piece of paper, it is the source of happiness that I'm trying to find. And once he gets that, it's like he doesn't get that happiness and he's back to his old self. And so I think this episode is so like underrated, even because a lot of the comparisons that we see between like Squidward, SpongeBob, I would say even Patrick, like Patrick at the end just comes and he sees a piece of paper and he just rolls it with like, gum and just throws it. There's a sense of like, Patrick's character also like showing up at the very end. It's like very interesting. But I think this is probably one of the earliest episodes, if not the first episode, that kind of shows you that fundamental divide between Squidward as a person and SpongeBob as a person. Like, SpongeBob was just given this piece of paper and he made it his own. Like, he was having fun with it. Like, he spent the entire day just like, doing weird stuff with that paper. And mind you, like, the earlier stuff that he did with the paper were not like really crazy or interesting. Like, the later stuff with like, like flying around and stuff like that was a bit crazy. But the initial stuff, like, doing the impersonations of like a pirate with an eye patch and stuff, that's like so simple. And it's like someone like Squidward, who's like an intellectual and he's like extremely snobby about like, like art should be like this and that. And like, he's really snobby and he's very strict about like how art should be and everything. He's not a free spirit in that sense about how art should be. Like, for example, how SpongeBob was like, playing around with the paper. And so for someone like Squidward, even like, sure, he tried to do those things, and that's exactly what he did. Like, at the end, he started off doing the things that SpongeBob was doing, which was the impersonations and everything. And immediately he was like, this is not fun. And so I think this episode's super interesting to talk about because there's a lot of like interesting messages over here. Like, with SpongeBob, you see that someone being so carefree and just like not caring about like, what others are doing and just having fun with like what you have, because the paper was just given to him and he just kind of committed to it and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna like, have fun with it and just like, try to get as much joy out of it as possible. Whereas someone like Squidward, like, he has these hobbies and like they're all very interesting hobbies, like they can all give you joy, but at the same time they're not giving him joy. And I think fundamentally this episode is like the first or maybe one of the earliest times you see that divide between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. Both SpongeBob and Patrick are people who kind of live in the present. They have fun with like, what they have. Like, even in this season alone, like, if you've watched like Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, in the beginning of that episode, they're just playing with like just random stuff and they've made up a random game. And when Squidward asks them like, what are you playing? They're just like, we don't know. But they're having fun, and that's the whole point. Whereas someone like Squidward in this episode, you can clearly see is struggling with that. Like, he struggles with the fact that he's given away the source of happiness that he's been looking for in all of his hobbies. And yeah, I guess if you wanted to take some takeaways or lessons from this episode, is just be happy with what you have, and just be happy in the present, and don't like look at others also for happiness. Like, SpongeBob was clearly like, having fun with the paper. Squidward was focused on the fact that SpongeBob was having fun and he was not focused on his own happiness. And so I think these are some really cool, like, you know, messages and just lessons to learn from an episode that aired like 24 years ago. And it's crazy like how much depth these episodes have as an adult. And yeah, I guess that's the video. Thanks for watching the video. Fun fact, this video has taken me 4 months to complete, so I would appreciate you liking and subscribing the video. Go check out my music and go drink some coffee.